Lean Learning. This video is based on key insights from the book Lean Learning by Pat Flynn. Introduction, you know too much. Pat Flynn begins by reflecting on a childhood experience, watching Jeopardy! With his dad, and how satisfying it felt to simply know things. He acknowledges that knowing facts can be fun, like winning at trivia night, but questions whether accumulating knowledge for its own sake is truly helpful in today's world. Flynn points out that information used to be valuable because it wasn't easily accessible, but now we're drowning in it. This abundance, he argues, is actually a problem. It affects how we interact with others, how we perform at work, and even our relationships. He emphasizes that simply having information isn't enough. It's what we do with it that matters. Flynn shares his personal story of being an overlearner, someone who always tried to gather as much information as possible. He excelled in school, earning high grades and graduating from a prestigious university. However, after being laid off during the 2008 recession, he realized that all his knowledge hadn't prepared him for real-world challenges. He found himself back home, feeling frustrated and lost. This experience taught him a valuable lesson. Information alone isn't the key to success. He'd fallen into the trap of collecting knowledge without applying it, a habit many people share. He describes this as an addiction to learning without action, constantly seeking the elusive answer in podcasts, videos, and articles, leading to overwhelm and delay. The author contrasts this with the resourcefulness of young children, using the example of Ms. Jenny's preschool class building a sunshade. The kids didn't need to be experts in construction. They simply identified a problem, brainstormed solutions, and started building. They weren't paralyzed by the need for perfect knowledge, but were willing to experiment and learn as they went. Flynn highlights that this is a powerful approach to problem-solving that adults often lose. He stresses that we don't need to know everything before we start. We only need to know enough to take the first step. Flynn introduces his concept of lean learning, which is about returning to this childlike approach. It's about identifying the minimum knowledge needed to solve a problem, taking action, and learning through experience. He explains that lean learning isn't about simplifying the task, but about streamlining the learning process. He shares his own success story, detailing how adopting this approach allowed him to launch multiple businesses, create products, write books, and build a thriving community. He emphasizes that lean learning isn't just for him. It's a strategy that can transform anyone's life. He then outlines the 4 steps of lean learning. Identify what you want to accomplish, learn only what you need, implement what you've learned, and review and repeat. Flynn acknowledges that this process may seem too simple, but argues that simplicity is its strength. He explains that each chapter of the book will delve deeper into these steps, providing practical exercises and inspiring stories. He believes that lean learning is particularly important in today's fast-paced world, where the ability to adapt quickly is crucial. He argues that we don't need more information, but a disciplined process for learning the right information at the right time. Flynn concludes by emphasizing the importance of purpose and meaning in life. He references Viktor Frankl's work, suggesting that a lack of purpose is more damaging than difficult circumstances. He believes that lean learning can help us find that purpose by allowing us to focus on meaningful goals and take consistent action. He encourages readers to embrace this approach, not just to achieve success, but to live more fulfilling lives. He challenges readers to overcome their fears and use their existing knowledge to make a positive impact on the world. He believes that by relearning how we learn, we can unlock our full potential and create a better future. Chapter 1: Inspiration Overload and the Art of Selective Curiosity. Pat Flynn begins by acknowledging that inspiration is everywhere, but too much can be overwhelming. He shares stories from his own life, his mother's cooking sparking a childhood passion, and a job loss forcing him into a new career, to illustrate how both enthusiastic pursuits and necessary changes can drive growth. Flynn emphasizes that as adults, unlike children with endless time, we must be selective about where we focus our energy. He introduces the idea that not all inspirations are created equal. and learning to tell the difference is key to avoiding wasted effort. Flynn then presents the inspiration matrix as a tool for sorting ideas. He explains that inspirations fall into 4 categories: recreational inspirations, which are fun hobbies, passion pursuits, which deeply excite us, junk sparks, which are fleeting distractions, and critical commitments, which are essential responsibilities. He uses his own love of gardening and fishing as examples of recreational activities that recharge him. He contrasts this with the intense drive he felt when inventing the SwitchPod, a product born from a genuine passion to solve a problem. Flynn stresses the importance of recognizing and letting go of junk sparks, those ideas that seem appealing but ultimately don't align with our goals, citing numerous examples from his own past attempts at various projects that went nowhere. The author highlights that simply having ideas isn't enough. It's crucial to envision the future consequences of pursuing them. Flynn encourages readers to use a time travel exercise, imagining themselves 1 year after successfully following a particular inspiration. He shares how this exercise helped him realize a high-paying job offer wouldn't actually make him happy, because it would mean sacrificing things he valued. He recounts a similar experience with podcasting, where he almost gave up early on but persevered and ultimately built a successful platform. This exercise, Flynn explains, isn't about predicting the future, but about gaining clarity on what truly matters. Flynn addresses common concerns about commitment. He acknowledges that it's easy to get caught up in too many things at once, and suggests focusing on one inspiration at a time for deeper progress. He advises readers to be realistic about their time and energy, and to be willing to adjust their course if an idea isn't working out. He emphasizes that failing to pursue an idea isn't a failure in itself, but a learning opportunity. He suggests dedicating a set amount of time, like 6 months, to a new pursuit before reassessing, and encourages readers to ask themselves tough questions about whether an activity truly aligns with their values and goals. Ultimately, Flynn argues that learning to identify what's essential and eliminate distractions is the key to turning inspiration into meaningful action and a fulfilling life. Chapter 2: Choosing Action over Information. Pat Flynn begins this part of his book by emphasizing that simply knowing things isn't enough. You have to do something with that knowledge. He shares a personal story about how he was stuck in planning mode for a long time, wanting to create an ebook for architects studying for a difficult exam. He had tons of notes and ideas, but wasn't actually launching anything. His business coach finally got frustrated and told him to just freaking get started. This was a turning point for Flynn, realizing all his research was actually a way to avoid taking action. It's easy to get caught up in gathering information, thinking you need the perfect answer before you begin, but Flynn learned that action is what truly unlocks progress. The core of Flynn's advice centers around identifying what truly matters and letting go of everything else. He introduces a question inspired by Tim Ferriss. If this were easy, what would it look like? ITWWWLL. This isn't about wishing things were simple, but about breaking down a big, overwhelming goal into the smallest, most manageable first step. For example, if Flynn wanted to launch his ebook, asking ITWWWILL might lead to the simple action of writing just 1 paragraph. It's about finding the minimum viable action, the tiniest thing you can do to move forward. He illustrates this with the story of creating a new tripod for vloggers with a partner, where they started by simply cutting shapes out of cardboard boxes to prototype ideas. Flynn stresses that perfection is the enemy of progress. He recalls a friend, John Lee Dumas, saying you have to be a disaster before you become a master. This idea is about embracing mistakes as learning opportunities. He shares his own experience launching his first business, where he used a trademarked name without realizing it. He received a cease and desist letter and almost gave up, but the experience forced him to learn about legal issues and ultimately made his business stronger. Flynn explains that there are different kinds of mistakes. Some are simple errors, others are complex due to many factors, and the most valuable are intelligent failures, where you try something new and learn from the outcome. He uses the example of restaurants adapting during the pandemic, showing how resilience and innovation can come from challenging times. Flynn also tackles the topic of fear, recognizing it as a common obstacle to taking action. He describes how fear can manifest as procrastination, overplanning, or constantly seeking more information. He suggests acknowledging your fears, challenging procrastination by setting small goals, and redefining what it means to be ready. He encourages readers to embrace imperfection and view mistakes as opportunities for growth. He shares a personal realization that fear doesn't disappear, but you can learn to use it as a signal that you're pushing yourself and moving in the right direction. Ultimately, Flynn encourages readers to focus on the future and consider what they might regret not doing. He suggests trading what-if scenarios for oh-well moments, meaning it's better to try and fail than to wonder what could have been. He emphasizes that a life filled with attempts and learning is more fulfilling than one filled with hesitation. He concludes by highlighting the importance of having supportive people around you, recognizing that even brilliant individuals need collaboration. Just like Doc Brown needed Marty McFly, everyone benefits from having champions who can guide and encourage them on their journey. Chapter 3, The Power of Champions, Harnessing Mentorship and Community. Pat Flynn emphasizes throughout the chapter that achieving big goals isn't a solo mission. He argues that everyone needs support, people he calls champions, to help them grow and overcome challenges. But having champions isn't just about receiving help. It's about building a network of people who lift each other up. Flynn learned this the hard way, initially believing he had to do everything himself, a mindset he now recognizes as limiting. He shares a story about struggling with a simple website fix for days, only to have it solved in minutes by a friend's acquaintance. This experience taught him the value of asking for help and realizing that needing others isn't a weakness. Flynn explains that identifying what's truly essential for growth means recognizing where you're stuck and being willing to let go of the idea that you must handle everything independently. This is where champions come in. He breaks down different types of champions: friends and family who offer consistent emotional support, peers who understand your journey because they're on a similar path, virtual mentors who inspire through their content, and personal mentors who provide one-on-one guidance. Each plays a unique role in helping you focus on what matters most. For example, a friend might offer encouragement when you're feeling discouraged, while a peer can share practical tips for overcoming a specific obstacle. The author stresses the importance of actively seeking out these relationships. He suggests joining communities, attending events, and reaching out to people you admire. He uses the example of mastermind groups, small, focused groups, where members support each other's growth, as a powerful way to stay accountable and receive honest feedback. Flynn's own experience with 2-decade-long mastermind groups demonstrates the long-term benefits of consistent peer support. These groups aren't just about solving problems. They're about creating a safe space for vulnerability and shared learning. Flynn also highlights the value of learning from virtual mentors, people whose work you admire and who can offer new perspectives. He shares how his own virtual mentors changed over time, depending on his needs. He emphasizes that it's important to be an active learner, engaging with their content and applying their ideas to your own life. However, he cautions against simply consuming information without taking action. The key is to balance learning with implementation. To help readers build their own champion network, Flynn provides practical steps: making a list of potential champions, reaching out to them, joining relevant communities, and identifying virtual and personal mentors. He encourages readers to be generous with their own knowledge and support, recognizing that reciprocity strengthens relationships and amplifies growth. He points out that building this network is an ongoing process, evolving as you grow and face new challenges. Ultimately, Flynn argues that focusing on essential growth requires letting go of the myth of the self-made individual. He believes that society has become too isolated, glorifying solo achievements while neglecting the power of collaboration. He encourages readers to embrace a communal ethos, supporting others as they climb, and recognizing that everyone benefits when we work together. He concludes by suggesting that by actively cultivating a team of champions, you not only increase your chances of success, but also create a more fulfilling and meaningful learning journey. Chapter 4, Protect Your Progress. Pat Flynn begins this section by reminding readers that success isn't a final destination, and setbacks are a normal part of the journey. He uses the story of his friend Terry and George, fellow golfers, to illustrate a key point. Sometimes, doing less actually helps you improve. Terry was obsessed with golf, reading about it, practicing constantly, yet he didn't get better. George, on the other hand, focused on simply playing the game and became a very skilled golfer. Flynn explains that Terry was getting bogged down in too much information, while George understood the power of focused action. This is a perfect example of how overthinking and constantly seeking more knowledge can actually hinder progress. Flynn encourages readers to create a mental filter, to block out distractions and focus on what truly matters. He suggests unsubscribing from everything that doesn't add value to your learning. This isn't just about emails or social media. It's about intentionally limiting your intake of information. He acknowledges that in today's world, with algorithms constantly trying to grab our attention, this is harder than ever. It's like an ongoing battle for our focus, and we often end up losing. Flynn proposes a radical solution: information bankruptcy, where you temporarily cut yourself off from all sources of input and then carefully reintroduce only those that directly support your goals. He suggests limiting yourself to 1 or 2 reliable resources. The author introduces the concept of just-in-time information, JITI, learned from his business coach, Jeremy. JITI means learning only what you need right now to take the next step, and blocking out everything else. Flynn admits he used to be an information hoarder, collecting knowledge just in case, but JITI helped him become more efficient. He illustrates this with his experience creating a study guide. Instead of researching everything about book design and marketing up front, he focused solely on the information needed to write the guide itself. He then gathered information about cover design after the guide was complete, and so on. This step-by-step approach prevented overwhelm and allowed him to make steady progress. He outlines the lean learning process: identify the next step, gather minimal information, take action, and repeat. Flynn addresses the fear of missing out, FOMO, that can arise when you limit your information intake. He understands the worry that you might miss something important, but argues that FOMO is often a trap. He suggests a for-later system, a place to save interesting information for future consideration, to quiet the anxiety without derailing your current focus. He emphasizes trusting your chosen path and setting boundaries on what information you consume. He also suggests scheduling time for broader learning, so you don't feel like you're completely cutting yourself off from new ideas. He then dives into the importance of time blocking, not just as a scheduling technique, but as a mindset. It's about creating dedicated, protected blocks of time for focused work, shielding yourself from distractions. Flynn acknowledges that life happens and interruptions are inevitable. He draws on the work of Daniel Kahneman, who explains how easily we miss things when our attention is divided. Flynn suggests scheduling distractions, intentionally setting aside time for checking email or social media to resist the constant urge for quick hits of stimulation. He stresses the importance of honoring your scheduled time, even when things get busy. Finally, Flynn discusses the importance of saying no to opportunities that don't align with your goals. He shares the story of Paul Jarvis, a designer who intentionally chose to remain a one-person business rather than scaling up and taking on more than he could handle. Flynn emphasizes that what you don't do is just as important as what you do. He encourages readers to examine how they spend their time, as that reveals their true priorities. He concludes by reminding readers that protecting their focus and staying true to their intentions is a powerful act of self-care, allowing them to pursue their passions with clarity and purpose. He also touches on the idea that people who try to discourage you are often projecting their own insecurities, and that it's important to surround yourself with supportive champions. He ends with a reminder that hurt people, and to approach criticism with empathy. Chapter 5, Voluntary Force Functions. Pat Flynn begins this section by reflecting on how often people learn best when they have to, rather than when they want to. He realized many of his own growth moments came from being pushed into uncomfortable situations, like a tight deadline at work or needing to quickly fix a problem. But he wondered if he could speed up that learning process by intentionally creating those challenging situations for himself. This led him to the idea of voluntary force functions. Flynn describes voluntary force functions as deliberately putting yourself in tough spots to force growth. It's not about being reckless or burning yourself out, but about carefully stepping just outside your comfort zone. He uses the example of learning to fish with a jig, a tricky bait he kept avoiding. He finally forced himself to learn by leaving all his other familiar baits at home, meaning he had to figure it out. This illustrates the core idea, removing easy options to make the desired action almost unavoidable. The author emphasizes that identifying what's essential for growth means recognizing what you're avoiding. What skill or task do you keep putting off? What makes you uncomfortable? Those are often the areas where you'll grow the most. Eliminating distractions, in this context, isn't just about turning off notifications. It's about removing the easy outs, the safety nets that allow you to stay stuck. Flynn's fishing example is perfect. He didn't just try to use the jig, he eliminated the option of going back to what he already knew how to do. Flynn shares a personal story about overcoming his fear of public speaking. He had been avoiding speaking engagements, even though he knew it would benefit his business. He finally said yes to a keynote speech, despite being terrified. This leap of faith was the first ingredient in his voluntary force function. He then created a time-locked commitment. The date of the speech was fixed, forcing him to prepare. The stakes were high because he didn't want to let down his friend who asked him to speak, and his reputation was on the line. This challenge was meaningful because overcoming his fear would open doors to new opportunities. Finally, he envisioned the rewards: a successful speech, increased authority, and future speaking engagements. To help readers design their own functions, Flynn outlines 5 key ingredients: a leap of faith, a time-locked commitment, high stakes, a meaningful challenge, and rewards on the other end. He stresses that all these elements work together. A challenge isn't effective if it doesn't matter to you, and a deadline isn't motivating if the stakes are too low. He provides examples like learning a language, booking a trip, starting a business, quitting your job, and running a marathon, registering for the race. Flynn then dives into the psychology of goal sharing. He explains that simply telling people your goals can actually decrease your motivation, because the social recognition feels like a premature reward. However, sharing with someone you respect, someone with higher status, can be beneficial because you care about their opinion and want to impress them. This is a subtle but important distinction. It's not about broadcasting your intentions to everyone, but about seeking accountability from the right people. Ultimately, Flynn encourages readers to identify an area for growth, design a voluntary force function with all 5 ingredients, and then take action. He emphasizes that it's about intentionally creating the conditions for growth, not just hoping it will happen. He reminds readers to start small, celebrate wins, and keep pushing themselves to step outside their comfort zones. The key takeaway is that by deliberately challenging yourself, you can accelerate your learning and unlock your full potential. Chapter 6, Persist or Pivot. Pat Flynn begins by framing life's decisions as crucial crossroads, moments where we must decide whether to keep going on our current path or change direction. He emphasizes that these choices are tough, especially when we've put a lot of effort into something. It's not just about success or failure, but about understanding what we truly want, how we're trying to get there, and who we are as people. Flynn uses the analogy of a sailor adjusting sails, constantly checking their position and making smart choices based on the conditions around them and their final destination. He shares his own story of being laid off in 2008, a pivotal moment that forced him to rethink his life and ultimately led him down a new path. Flynn introduces Brian Lubin's story as an example of someone who realized he was climbing the wrong mountain, achieving success in a corporate job that didn't actually make him happy. Brian's decision to start his own business, leaving behind a secure job, highlights the importance of reassessment. Flynn contrasts this with his own situation, where he was forced to reassess, while Brian chose to do so. Both, however, made significant changes that altered their lives. The author points out that even when things are going well, it's important to analyze what's working and optimize efforts, rather than simply riding the wave. He stresses that autopilot is the enemy of progress, and that constant self-evaluation is key to staying on track. The core of the chapter revolves around understanding when to stay the course and when to change direction. Flynn introduces the idea of a why, your purpose, cause, or belief, drawing from Simon Sinek's work. He explains that knowing your why isn't just about starting something, but about sticking with it, acting as both a guiding light and a warning system. He illustrates this with the story of Shane and Jocelyn Sams, a couple who built a business around the value of family. A scary incident involving their young son made them realize they needed more control over their time and the ability to be present for their family, leading them to pursue passive income and ultimately build a successful online business. Flynn emphasizes that their why family guided their decisions, even when they had to pivot later on, like when Shane's speaking business grew too demanding and took him away from home. He contrasts this with a moment of crisis for the Samses, where they had to make a tough call and go against the grain to prioritize what truly mattered. This illustrates that sometimes the right path isn't the easiest or most obvious one. Flynn encourages readers to schedule a dedicated self-assessment session to reflect on their own progress, passion, and purpose. He breaks down these 3 Ps as a framework for self-evaluation. Assessing progress involves celebrating achievements and acknowledging challenges. Flynn admits his own struggle with focusing on the future and forgetting to appreciate how far he's come, sharing a story about launching his podcast and initially almost giving up because it wasn't growing quickly enough. He suggests keeping a win list to track accomplishments. Passion, according to Flynn, is the fuel that keeps us going. He encourages readers to identify activities that energize them and address those that drain their energy, offering strategies like adding novelty, connecting with others, or taking a break. He shares his own experience of hiring a podcast editor to free up his time and focus on the parts of the job he enjoyed. Purpose, Flynn explains, is about alignment with your core values and long-term vision. He suggests creating a personal mission statement to articulate these values and use it as a guide for decision-making. He shares his own mission statement to deliver value-first solutions as an example. He stresses that seeking feedback from others is crucial, as it's hard to see ourselves objectively. He advises being specific when asking for feedback and being open to hearing things you might not want to hear. Flynn concludes by emphasizing that continuous self-reflection and timely pivots are essential for growth, and that embracing feedback is a key part of the process. He encourages readers to view change not as a failure, but as an opportunity to realign with their true purpose. Chapter 7: Micro-Mastery and Quantum Leaps. Pat Flynn's chapter explores how people can grow, whether it's in their careers or just as individuals. He argues that growth isn't always about huge changes, but often comes from focusing on the right small steps and knowing when to make bigger leaps. A key idea is figuring out what truly matters for your progress and letting go of everything else that pulls you away from it. Flynn uses the story of Ori Bengal, a traveler who rediscovered his passion for art, to illustrate this. Ori wasn't suddenly inspired to become a great artist. He started by creating one piece of art every day. This wasn't about making masterpieces right away, but about consistent, small improvements. He focused on one tiny detail at a time, like brushstrokes or color, and slowly built his skills. This is what Flynn calls micro-mastery, getting really good at small parts of a skill, which adds up to big results over time. It's like learning an instrument. You don't start by playing a whole song, you practice scales and chords first. The author explains that micro-mastery is about breaking down a big goal into tiny, manageable pieces. If someone wants to get better at running, they wouldn't just run every day. They might spend 1 week focusing on their posture, another on their breathing, and another on their pace. This focused approach is more effective than trying to improve everything at once. Flynn shares his own experience with band in high school and college, where the conductor would isolate difficult parts of songs and have them practice those repeatedly. It was frustrating, but it led to real improvement. He also describes golf lessons where the coach focused on one element of the game at a time, like reading greens, before moving on to the next. Flynn emphasizes that it's important to identify what's most important to focus on. Ori, for example, noticed what specific skills he needed to improve in his art and concentrated on those. This is about being honest with yourself about your weaknesses and prioritizing what will make the biggest difference. It's about cutting out the things that don't contribute to your goals. He uses the analogy of a chef perfecting a 3-course meal versus handing out candy. One builds lasting relationships, the other is quickly forgotten. However, Flynn also acknowledges that sometimes small steps aren't enough. He introduces the idea of quantum leaps, big, bold moves that can dramatically accelerate your progress. He uses the example of Nathan Barry, who shut down a successful business to focus entirely on a struggling startup called ConvertKit. This was a risky decision, but it ultimately led to huge success. Flynn explains that quantum leaps aren't about recklessness, but about carefully assessing your situation and having the courage to make a big change when necessary. To help readers identify when to take a quantum leap, Flynn suggests a Power 10 strategy. He borrowed this idea from his rowing days in college. A Power 10 is a short burst of intense effort, 10 focused strokes in rowing, or 10 days of focused work on a project. It's about giving something your full attention for a limited time to make significant progress. He explains that it's not about working harder all the time, but about strategically focusing your energy when it matters most. Flynn stresses that identifying what's essential and eliminating distractions is key to both micro-mastery and quantum leaps. It's about saying no to things that don't align with your goals and prioritizing what truly matters. He encourages readers to ask themselves what bold move they could make to push themselves beyond their comfort zone and achieve their full potential. Ultimately, Flynn believes that growth requires both consistent effort and courageous action. It's about finding the right balance between small, incremental improvements and big, transformative leaps. Chapter 8, From Learning to Leading. Pat Flynn reflects on his career journey, starting with his time as an architect. He realized that while he was good at his job and learning, it felt transactional, a simple exchange of work for approval. Losing that job initially felt devastating, but it ultimately opened the door to a more meaningful path. Flynn discovered that even the small parts he played in large building projects left a lasting impact, like the PF Chang's in Hawaii, he always points out to his family. This experience taught him that even seemingly minor contributions can be significant. The shift came when Flynn began teaching others, first about the LEAD exam and then about building online businesses. This wasn't just about exchanging information. It was about genuinely changing people's lives. He received heartfelt thanks from students who used his guidance to advance their careers or overcome difficult times, something he hadn't experienced in his previous job. Flynn emphasizes that teaching isn't just about giving knowledge, it's about growing alongside your students. He learned as much from their questions and challenges as they learned from him. This is where the core idea of the chapter comes into play, solidifying learning through sharing. Flynn explains that the best way to truly understand something is to teach it to someone else. When you try to explain a concept, you have to break it down into simpler parts, identify any gaps in your own understanding, and find new ways to communicate it effectively. He experienced this firsthand when he created a guide on writing ebooks. The process of creating the guide forced him to systematize his own writing process, leading to more books more subscribers, and more sales. Importantly, the questions he received from his audience pushed him to learn even more, like figuring out the best font size for online reading or how to create 2-column ebooks. These weren't questions he'd considered before, but they led to valuable new knowledge. Flynn stresses the importance of working in public, meaning openly sharing your learning journey and progress. He uses the example of Arvid Kahl, who is building an application called Podscan, FM in public. Kahl shares his successes and struggles openly, inviting feedback and collaboration from his audience. This transparency builds trust and creates a community around the project. Flynn himself used a similar approach with the Smart Passive Income blog, documenting his process of building a website in a new niche and sharing his results. This not only built his audience, but also helped him learn faster. He highlights that sharing your work isn't about showing off. It's about attracting opportunities and inspiring others. To help readers put this into practice, Flynn offers several suggestions. He suggests hosting workshops or webinars, creating online courses, writing blog posts, speaking at events, or simply helping a friend. He also encourages people to teach their kids, as explaining things in simple terms reinforces your own understanding. He emphasizes that building a community is key. Flynn's own SBI community has seen increased engagement and collaboration, with members helping each other and even teaching him new things. He shares examples of members specializing in areas like video setup and email deliverability, contributing their expertise to the group. Ultimately, Flynn argues that embracing the learning-teaching cycle is essential for growth. It's about being willing to share your knowledge, learn from others, and create a ripple effect of positive change. He encourages readers to start small, focus on providing value, and trust the process. He reminds everyone that everyone starts somewhere, and that their unique perspective is valuable. He concludes with a quote from Maya Angelou, "When you learn, teach. When you get, give," emphasizing the importance of reciprocity and continuous growth. Conclusion: you know enough to begin. Pat Flynn concludes his book with a powerful message: you already know enough to start. He illustrates this idea with the story of Pamela Acosta, who signed up for a challenging canoe pilgrimage despite not knowing how to swim. This wasn't about recklessness, Flynn explains, but about embracing lean learning, starting with what you have and figuring things out as you go. Pam's story highlights a key principle: waiting for perfect readiness is often a roadblock to growth. She could have easily stayed on shore, but instead, she jumped in, took swimming lessons, and prepared as best she could in the time she had. Flynn emphasizes that identifying what's truly essential for growth means focusing on solving real problems, not collecting endless information. He contrasts this with content hoarding, where people endlessly research and prepare without taking action. Pam didn't spend years studying Mayan culture or oceanography. She focused on the immediate need, learning to swim and physically preparing for the canoe trip. This is about prioritizing just-in-time information, learning what you need when you need it, rather than trying to learn everything up front. Imagine building a treehouse. You don't need to become a master carpenter before hammering the first nail. You learn as you build, researching specific techniques as they become necessary. The author explains that this approach isn't just about skills, but about a mindset. He introduces concepts like voluntary force functions, deliberately putting yourself in situations that require you to learn and adapt, like Pam signing up for the pilgrimage. He also mentions the keystone question: if this were easy, what would it look like? A way to simplify overwhelming tasks and focus on the most impactful steps. For example, if learning a new language feels daunting, the keystone question might lead you to focus on learning 10 essential phrases first, rather than trying to master the entire grammar system. Flynn acknowledges that traditional education often struggles to keep pace with the rapidly changing world. The ability to learn quickly and adapt is now more important than ever. He argues that lean learning isn't just about career advancement, but about unlocking your potential and making a difference. It's about embracing a continuous journey of growth, being comfortable with discomfort, and learning from failures. Think of a video game. You don't start knowing everything. You learn by playing, making mistakes, and leveling up. He stresses the importance of community and mentorship. Pam had champions who would have helped her if she'd gotten into trouble, and Flynn encourages readers to find their own support systems. He also highlights the power of teaching others, which deepens your own understanding. Sharing what you learn isn't just helpful to others, it solidifies your own knowledge. It's like explaining a math problem to a friend. You often understand it better yourself in the process. Ultimately, Flynn's message is one of empowerment. He encourages readers to identify their own pilgrimages, the challenges and opportunities that matter most to them, and to take that first step, even if they don't feel fully prepared. He reminds us that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and that the power of lean learning lies in small, consistent actions that compound over time. It's about trusting the process, embracing the unknown, and believing that you already have what it takes to begin. And that brings us to the end of our summary of this book. I hope you found it insightful and valuable. If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe for more. Your support helps us bring you more great content. Thanks for watching.